Do you know what it means to lose everything in a single day? I do. My name is Job, and this is my story. I once walked beneath the golden light of peace. My flocks covered the hills of Uz like a living sea. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and servants without number. I was the richest among all men of the East, yet my wealth was not my pride. My heart belonged to God. I feared him and turned away from evil, for I knew that blessings without righteousness are like dust before the wind. I had 7 sons and 3 daughters, the joy of my life. Whenever they gathered to feast, laughter would fill their homes. And I would rise early in the morning to offer a burnt offering for each of them, saying, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." It was my way to keep our home under the shadow of his mercy. In those days, I thought faith was simple, that goodness secured peace, and obedience guarded joy. Each sunrise looked the same, the lowing of oxen, the songs of my daughters, the fragrance of burnt offerings rising toward heaven. I believed the world was steady beneath my feet, that life was built upon a promise unbreakable. But unseen to me, there was a meeting in the heavens, a conversation that would shatter everything I understood about faith, justice, and pain. That morning began like any other. The sun rose over Uz, and the wind carried the scent of the fields. My servants worked, my children celebrated. I lifted my eyes in prayer, unaware that the sky itself was holding its breath. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Those words would soon be tested. If you have ever stood at the edge of loss, wondering if your faith could survive the storm, stay with me. My story is yours too. Subscribe to our channel, and in the comments write your declaration for today. Unshakable faith. That morning began like any other. None of us knew. Heaven had been watching. The sun rose gently over the land of Uz. I remember the color of that morning, pale gold against a sky that promised peace. Birds sang above the stone walls, and the sound of the herds filled the valley. Nothing seemed unusual. I had prayed at dawn, offering gratitude as I always did, not knowing those words would soon echo through ruins. The first messenger arrived breathless, his clothes torn, his eyes wide with terror. "Master," he cried, "the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby when the Sabaeans attacked. They struck down the servants and carried off the animals. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." His words struck like a cold wind, but before I could answer, another voice broke through. "The fire of God fell from the heavens," said the second messenger, "trembling, and burned up the sheep and the servants with them. I alone survived." The earth beneath me seemed to shift. I looked toward the horizon, where smoke rose like a wound in the sky. My heart began to tremble. Still, I tried to stand firm. But the test was not over. While that man still spoke, a third came running. Dust covered his face, his breath was ragged. "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties. They swept down on your camels, carried them away, and killed all your servants. I alone escaped to tell you." I felt my hands grow weak. My wealth, every piece of my life's work, had vanished in the span of moments. I had lost what men could see. I did not yet know I would lose what I loved most. As I struggled to comprehend the ruin, a final messenger appeared. His voice broke before he could speak. "Your sons and daughters," he said, "were feasting at the home of your eldest." Suddenly, a mighty wind came from the desert. It struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them. "They are gone. I alone escaped to tell you." The air disappeared from my chest. My knees buckled. I tore my robe and shaved my head, a gesture of mourning so deep it burned the soul. My body fell to the ground, but I could not cry. My voice came out in a whisper. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." There was silence then, not peace, but the silence of something broken beyond repair. I looked toward heaven, and the same God I had served now felt distant, unreachable. Yet even in confusion, something in me refused to curse him. I would not call the giver of life the author of evil. My mind could not understand, but my heart clung to the truth I had always known. He is God, and I am dust. The days that followed were heavy and colorless. My home, once filled with laughter, was now only echoes and ashes. My servants avoided my eyes. I sat among the remnants of what once was, feeling the weight of every question that has ever haunted a man who believes. How could the righteous suffer so deeply? How could the Almighty watch in silence while life collapsed in a breath? At night, I would walk where my children once sang. The wind moved through the ruins like a whisper of the past. I thought of their faces, their laughter, the warmth of their gatherings. I thought of the prayers I had offered for them, the sacrifices I made so that they might be safe. What protection could I offer now? What sacrifice was left? Then came a deeper wound. My body broke into sores from head to toe. The pain was constant, unrelenting. I sat among the ashes, scraping myself with a piece of broken pottery. My wife, once my comfort, now stood before me with eyes hollowed by despair. "Do you still maintain your integrity?" she asked. "Curse God and die." Her words were like salt on an open wound, but I could not. "You speak like a foolish woman," I said softly. "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" My lips trembled, but I did not accuse the Almighty. In that moment, faith was not a feeling. It was survival. People passed by at a distance, whispering. The man they once honored was now a shadow on the ash heap. I had become a story told in pity. Yet even then, I lifted my gaze toward the heavens. If God had allowed this, then God had a reason. And though my heart could not find it, my soul still whispered his name. The world had fallen apart around me. I had nothing left. No wealth, no children, no comfort, no health. Only questions and the faint memory of peace. But sometimes, when all that can be taken is gone, what remains is what was truly ours all along. Faith stripped bare, standing in the dark, waiting for the voice of God to speak. The Lord gave. The Lord took away, yet the silence only deepened. 7 days passed, though they felt like 7 eternities. My body sat among the ashes, but my mind wandered through ruins no eyes could see. The sun rose and set without meaning. Pain had become my only companion, and silence, a cruel mirror to my thoughts. My friends had arrived, 3 of the men I once trusted with counsel, Eliphaz of Teman, Bildad of Shuhah, and Zophar of Naamah. They had heard of my affliction, and came as friends do to comfort me. Yet when they saw me from afar, they stopped in disbelief. My figure was unrecognizable, covered with sores, my face hollowed by grief. They began to weep aloud. Each tore his robe and threw dust upon his head, a sign of mourning. Without a word, they sat on the ground beside me. 1 day passed, then another. 7 days and 7 nights. No voice, no question, no comfort. Just silence, heavy and sacred. Perhaps they were wise to say nothing, for what words can heal a man whose soul has been torn open by heaven itself? But on the 7th day the silence broke, not by their lips but by mine. My sorrow could no longer be contained. My voice rose from the depths of anguish, raw and trembling. May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, "A man is conceived," may that day turn to darkness. May God above not care about it, nor light shine upon it. Those words did not come from rebellion, but from pain too deep for reason. I was not cursing God. I was cursing the day I was born into a world that could hold such suffering. The ashes beneath me seemed to pulse with my grief. "Why is life given to those in misery?" I cried, "and to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death that does not come, who dig for it more than for hidden treasure?" My voice cracked, yet the questions poured out like water breaking through a dam. Why is light given to one whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? Each word echoed into the stillness unanswered. I felt as though my cries rose to a ceiling of iron. My daily food had become sighs. My groans spilled like a river. "What I feared has come upon me," I said. "What I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, only turmoil." I looked at my friends. They remained still, eyes downcast, their expressions unreadable. Perhaps they pitied me. Perhaps they feared my honesty. Few men dare to speak to God from the depths of their pain, afraid of what might answer back. But I had nothing left to lose, not dignity, not reputation, not pride. I was already broken, and brokenness has a strange kind of freedom. In that moment, I no longer prayed for restoration. I prayed for understanding. I asked the Almighty not for wealth or healing, but for meaning, a glimpse of reason behind the storm that had consumed my life. Yet the heavens remained silent. The only sound was the faint rustle of wind moving through the ashes. Night after night I sat awake, haunted by memories. I remembered the laughter of my sons, the softness of my daughters' voices, the warmth of my wife's hand before despair took her words away. Now those memories pierced deeper than the pain in my skin. I would have given all the riches of the East just to hear their laughter once more. But I was left only with echoes and questions that seemed too dangerous to ask aloud. I began to look at my reflection in the fragments of pottery scattered at my feet. The man who stared back was not the one I had known. His eyes were hollow, yet beneath the ashes a faint spark remained. Not hope, not yet, but something close. I wondered if God saw that spark, or if he too had turned his face away. I lifted my eyes toward the stars. They shone cold and indifferent, as though untouched by the cries of men. And yet, deep within, I felt that even in his silence, God was still near. Perhaps silence itself was his answer, an invitation to trust when no reason could be found. The world teaches that suffering is proof of guilt, that pain must always have a cause. But as I sat there, surrounded by friends who could not understand, I began to sense that the truth might be greater than my pain, that perhaps there are mysteries in the heart of God beyond human measure. Still, I was not ready to see them. All I could feel was the weight of loss and the fear that I would never again hear his voice. The 7 days of silence had ended, but the greater silence had only begun. The questions I spoke aloud would soon awaken answers I did not expect, not from men, but from heaven itself. If only God would answer me, if only he would speak. When my lament finally broke the 7 days of silence, my friends answered at last. They had come to comfort. Their words became a weight. Eliphaz of Teman spoke first gently, as one who leans on visions and the wisdom of years. His eyes were kind but firm. Suffering, he said, does not spring from the dust without cause. Consider, he urged, who being innocent has ever perished. If I would submit, if I would search out hidden fault and return to the Almighty, my fortunes would bloom again. His counsel wrapped pain inside a simple formula: repent and the night will end. I listened, though my skin burned and my heart ached. I did not claim sinlessness, only integrity. I had feared God, turned away from evil, offered sacrifices for my children before joy touched their lips. Was it arrogance to say so, or truth? I answered Eliphaz with trembling resolve. If I cry out, it is not rebellion. It is because my wound refuses to be quiet. Teach me and I will be silent, I thought. Show me my offense. But he offered the map of retribution, not the mystery of God. Then Bildad of Shuhah took his turn, a man of rules, straight lines, and steady conclusions. He stood upon tradition like a soldier upon a wall. Does God pervert justice? He asked. If my children had died, it was because their path had strayed. If I were pure and upright, I would be restored at once. His certainty was a hammer. Each blow rang with cold assurance. I felt my breath shorten. My grief was being measured on scales I did not recognize. Could sorrow this deep be reduced to ledger lines of merit and blame? Zophar of Nama was the harshest. He called my words a flood of empty talk and wished that God would open his lips against me. He urged me to stretch out my hands, to put away the sin in my tent. Then he promised I would forget my misery like waters that have passed away. He did not see the ash clinging to my skin, the emptiness where my children once laughed. He saw a case, not a father. He saw a verdict, not a man. I answered them, but not with rage. Weariness had scorched anger from me, leaving only the iron of conviction. Doubtless you are the people, and wisdom will die with you, I said, my voice low. But I have understanding as well as you. I told them what my soul knew. The easy answers of men cannot hold the weight of a righteous man's sorrow. You are all worthless physicians, I said, physicians who misread the disease and worsened the wound. Their theology was a neat circle. The righteous prosper, the wicked suffer. But my life lay shattered at their feet, a testimony that did not fit their chart. I had not turned from God. I had blessed his name in the hour of loss. I had not called him evil. I had called him holy, even through tears. If their counsel were true, then my nights should have been short and my dawn bright. Yet the darkness deepened, so I lifted my case higher than their court. I desire to speak to the Almighty. I wish to argue my case with God, not as a rebel shaking a fist, but as a son bringing his questions to the only judge whose verdict matters. My lips trembled, yet I would not accuse him of injustice. I asked for an audience, for clarity, for scales that measure more than rumor and suspicion. Will you speak wickedly for God? I challenged my friends. Will you show partiality for him? If they defended God by wounding the innocent, they defended a God I did not recognize. There were moments when despair clawed at me like a beast. My skin throbbed. My breath came like a broken bellows. And still, in that dark valley, a thin line of trust held me. Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. Those words tasted like ashes and honey. I would not curse the one who formed me from dust. I would not throw away the reverence that had guided my steps since youth. If this was a test, I would not volunteer to fail it. If it was discipline, I would receive it, though I could not trace its cause. Eliphaz spoke again, soft as a whisper drifting from a dream. He spoke of visions in the night, of a voice that declared no mortal is pure. Submit, he urged, and you will be at peace. I almost envied his certainty. It spared him the terror of the questions that haunted me. Bildad repeated the old patterns. The lamp of the wicked goes out. Zophar pressed repentance like a seal. To them my grief proved guilt. My defense proved pride. I did not deny that wickedness exists, nor that God brings the proud low. I only asked them to look at me, truly look, a man who had feared God when the barns were full and when the graves were fresh. I begged them for honesty, for hospitality of heart. Instead, they tightened their answers and loosened their compassion. The more I bled, the sharper their logic became, so I spoke from the chasm within me. Even now, my witness is in heaven. My advocate is on high. If earth would not understand, perhaps heaven would. I asked that my sin be counted truly, my steps weighed on honest scales, my plea heard without prejudice. I did not want a loophole. I wanted a hearing. I did not crave my fortunes back. I craved the face of God, the nearness that once made ordinary mornings feel like holy ground. The debate went on like a storm that refuses to move off the sea, wave after wave against a shore already eroded. My friends clung to their certainty. I clung to my integrity. Between us lay the question that has followed the righteous through every age. Can faith survive when the world insists it has failed? Night came, and with it a brittle quiet. The ash heap cooled. My friends' voices faded into murmurs. I sat alone beneath a sky that hid its answers among 1,000 silent stars. My body ached. My spirit burned. I lifted my face and let the night wind pass over me, as if searching for a word that would not come. I had argued with men and found no comfort. I had searched my conscience and found no relief. Only this remained, a heart, wounded yet stubborn, turning upward with a plea that would not die. They called me guilty. I called out to God, but heaven remained silent. There comes a point in every storm when words no longer comfort and silence no longer heals. My friends had spoken their fill. Their reasonings circled me like vultures, waiting for confession that would not come. I was tired, not only in body but in soul. Pain had settled in my bones like fire that refused to die, and questions burned hotter still. I wanted to understand, not simply endure. I wanted to speak with the Almighty himself. If he had written my story in suffering, then I would ask him to read me the lines. The nights were long, sleepless, and filled with groaning. My wounds festered, my strength faded. Every breath was labor. The stars, once my companions, became sharp and distant. I would whisper into the dark, "Why do you hide your face? Why treat me as your enemy?" I felt shackled by invisible chains, each day repeating the ache of the last, each dawn mocking my prayers. My skin clung to my bones, my spirit grew thin. Yet the flame of faith, though small, refused to be extinguished. At times I thought death would be mercy. I envied the graves where the weary rest. But even death would not answer the question that haunted me. Why? Why should the righteous suffer while the wicked thrive? I saw men who lied, cheat and kill, prospering beneath the same sun that scorched my pain. Their children danced in the fields, while mine lay silent in the earth. They built houses of stone while I sat among ashes. If this was justice, what hope remained for the upright? I spoke these thoughts aloud, trembling at my own boldness. My friends looked away, unable to bear such honesty. They thought me blasphemous, but I had no strength left for pretense. As surely as God lives, I said, the Almighty who has made my life bitter, as long as my breath is in me, my lips will not speak wickedness. My tongue will utter no lies. I swore by the very God who had broken me that I would not abandon my integrity. If I perished, I would perish as a man who spoke truth. I remembered the days when the presence of God felt near, when prayer was answered with peace, when blessing followed obedience. But now heaven was silent. I searched for him in the east, but he was not there. In the west, but I could not find him. I turned north and south, but the wind brought only emptiness. Still, deep within, I whispered, "He knows the way that I take, and when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold." Those words did not erase the pain, but they gave me breath enough to keep living. As my body decayed, my faith became the only strength that did not. I saw that suffering has layers: physical, social, mental, spiritual. My sores throbbed. People crossed the street to avoid me. Their eyes judged what their minds could not grasp. I felt like an outcast among the living, a man forgotten even by the God he served. Yet somewhere beyond the veil of despair, I sensed that the silence of God might not be absence, but mystery, a silence that speaks of things too vast for mortal tongues. I lifted my face toward heaven again and cried, "Show me my offense and my sin. Tell me why you count me as your enemy." I did not want pity. I wanted truth. I was not afraid of judgment, only of distance, of a God who sees yet says nothing. My groans turned into prayer, and my prayer into argument. "Withdraw your hand from me, and stop frightening me with your terrors. Summon me, and I will answer. Or let me speak, and you reply." There were moments when the weight was too great. I thought my soul would collapse under it. But even then, I sensed that the question itself, the yearning for meaning, was proof that faith still breathed within me. If I truly believed God cruel or indifferent, I would not cry to him at all. My cries were not rebellion. They were recognition that only he could make sense of my pain. I told my friends, "I will never admit you are right till I die. I will not deny my integrity." Their faces hardened. They could not see that my defiance was not pride, but faith refusing to die. They accused me of arrogance, yet I was bowing lower than ever before a God whose justice I did not understand, but whose existence I could not deny. At night, the wind would move through the ruins of my home, carrying the faint scent of dust and memories. I wondered if God heard that sound, the mourning of a life once whole. The stars glittered above, indifferent or divine. I could not tell. My heart whispered what my lips no longer dared. If only I could find him, I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I imagined standing before his throne, trembling, yes, but honest. I would ask why he gives life to those who long for death, why he allows the wicked to flourish and the innocent to be crushed. And yet, if he appeared, I knew my words would vanish. No man can stand before pure holiness without his arguments turning to dust. Still, I longed for that moment, even if it destroyed me. For destruction in the presence of God would be sweeter than surviving in his silence. The days blurred together. My friends continued their speeches, each more certain than the last. I no longer argued. Their words fell on me like rain on stone, sound without entry. My ears had grown weary of human logic. My heart listened only for the sound that had once guided my life, the voice of the Almighty. Somewhere in the unseen realm, I felt the air change. The wind began to move differently, curling through the valley, carrying a low hum like the breath before a storm. My spirit stirred. I did not yet know what it meant, but something in creation seemed to awaken, as if the silence that had ruled my suffering was about to break. I lifted my eyes once more and whispered, "Even if you slay me, yet will I trust in you." It was not courage, only surrender. My questions remained unanswered, my wounds unhealed. But I could feel it now, a presence gathering at the edge of the horizon, a voice forming in the wind. Then the wind began to rise. The wind rose from the desert with a voice like thunder hidden in its throat. Dust spun through the valley, and the ashes around me scattered into the air, as if fleeing from a presence too holy to touch. My heart trembled. The sky darkened. The earth held its breath, and for the first time since the day of my ruin, silence broke. Not with comfort, but with command. Out of the whirlwind, the Almighty spoke. Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? His voice did not strike my ears, it struck my soul. Every bone in me felt the weight of that question. It was not accusation, it was revelation. Brace yourself like a man, he said. I will question you, and you shall answer me. I had begged for a hearing. I'd longed for God to explain himself. Now standing beneath his voice, I understood that I had not been the judge waiting for answers. I was the one being questioned. His words came in waves of power, shaping the air, echoing through creation itself. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Each question unfolded like lightning across the heavens. He spoke of the dawn, taking hold of the edges of the earth, shaking the wicked from it. He spoke of the sea, contained behind doors, commanded to halt at his decree. I saw in my mind the first morning, the roaring waters clothed in cloud, and I felt small, smaller than dust beneath his feet. Have you ever given orders to the morning, he asked, or shown the dawn its place? No, I had cursed the day of my birth, but he was the one who had written the laws that govern day and night. I had questioned justice, but I did not know the breadth of his wisdom. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. I'd been trying to measure infinity with human thought. He asked of the stars and the constellations, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? He spoke of the storehouses of snow, the paths of lightning, the wild donkeys who roam free, the mountain goats who give birth unseen by men. Every word revealed his intimate knowledge of creation, his mastery over chaos, his delight in what I could not control. Then his voice deepened like rolling thunder. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you. It eats grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among my works. The image burned into my mind, a creature vast, untamable, fearless of flood or sword. Even the mightiest beast was his handiwork. Alive by his breath and bound by his will. In that moment, I realized the truth I had been blind to. God's sovereignty was not a theory, it was the very fabric of existence. Every breath, every tear, every storm and sunrise moved by his command. My pain had been real, my loss unbearable, but even in my suffering his hand had not trembled. The chaos that surrounded me had never escaped his rule. I fell to the ground, covering my face with my hands. My voice was barely a whisper. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. The wind swirled around me, thick with power and dust. Yet the Almighty was not done. His voice came again, not as wrath, but as weight. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? The words pierced my heart. That was the truth beneath my cries. I had tried to fit God into the pattern of human fairness. But his justice was older than time, deeper than oceans, purer than light. Do you have an arm like God's? He asked. Can your voice thunder like mine? He spoke of majesty and wrath, of humbling the proud and bringing down the wicked. He described Leviathan, that monstrous serpent of the deep breathing fire and smoke. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear, he said. It looks down on all that are haughty. It's king over all that are proud. In those words, I saw not just the beast, but the reflection of humanity, of pride itself. Untamed and defiant before its maker, I understood then that the storm was not punishment. It was revelation. God was not explaining suffering. He was revealing himself. The answer to my questions was not a reason, but a presence. I had asked for explanations and received encounter. And that was enough. The world around me calmed, but my heart was louder than the thunder. Tears mingled with dust on my face. I know, I said, that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, Who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. My voice broke under the weight of awe. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. I fell to the earth again, not in despair this time, but in surrender. The same ground that once held my ashes now became holy beneath me. I had been searching for answers in the ruins of my life, but the truth had always been this. I was not meant to understand everything, only to trust the one who does. In the voice of the storm, I found what the silence could not give, perspective. The creator of the stars had seen me in the ashes. The God who set limits for the seas had also set limits for my pain. His justice was not absent. It was beyond my sight. And though I had spoken from the dust, he had answered me from eternity. The wind softened. The sky began to clear. My heart still trembled, but now it trembled with reverence, not fear. I did not know what the days ahead would hold, but for the first time since my sorrow began, I knew this. God was not silent. He had never been. I had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. When the storm finally ceased, the air carried a stillness unlike any I had ever known. The whirlwind was gone, but its echo remained inside me. I no longer felt small because I was nothing. I felt small because I had glimpsed everything, the vastness of a God whose power no mind can measure, whose justice no man can contain. My heart was quiet now. The ashes beneath me were the same, yet somehow they no longer held despair. They held worship. I tore my robe once again, but this time not in grief. It was in reverence, a surrender to the one whose wisdom outlives every answer. I lifted my eyes to the heavens and spoke softly. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. My voice trembled as I continued. I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. The words were not prepared. They were born from revelation. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. The repentance I offered was not for hidden sin, but for presuming to judge God's ways. I had sought explanations. He had given me himself. What more could I ask? For the first time in my suffering, I did not want an answer. I wanted only his presence to remain. The storm had not destroyed me. It had remade me. The man who sat among ashes was not the same who had once sat among riches. I had seen the face of my Creator through the veil of pain, and that sight was worth all that had been taken. Then came a voice, not from the whirlwind, but from mercy. The Lord turned his attention toward my three friends, those who had spoken much and understood little. He said to Eliphaz, I am angry with you and your two friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. The justice of heaven does not miss a single word. Even well-intentioned speech can wound the truth when spoken without knowledge. God commanded them to offer burnt sacrifices, and that I should pray for them, that their sin might be forgiven. When I heard this, something in me broke, not in pain, but in compassion. I could have turned away, could have demanded repayment for the wounds their words had left. But I remembered how patient the Lord had been with me in my own ignorance. So I prayed. I prayed for the very men who had accused me, for those who had sat in judgment when all I needed was comfort. I asked God to forgive them as he had shown mercy to me. And when I prayed for them, something unseen shifted in the heavens. Scripture says, after Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. I did not pray for restoration. I prayed for reconciliation. But grace cannot resist a heart that forgives. My brothers and sisters, those who had once avoided me, began to return. They entered my home and shared a meal with me again. They brought gifts, pieces of silver and gold rings, tokens of remembrance, but they meant far more. They were signs that life had not ended in ashes. Slowly, the ruins of my life began to bloom again. The Lord blessed the latter part of my life more than the first. My flocks multiplied. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. The hills of Uz once again echoed with the bleating of life. But these were not the blessings that mattered most. God gave me 7 sons and 3 daughters, the same number I had lost. I cannot describe what it was like to hold them, to feel the weight of new life in hands that had buried so much. They were not replacements. They were reminders that God brings beauty from dust. I gave my daughters names that would tell their story to generations. Jemima, Kezia, and Keren Hapush, names that spoke of beauty, fragrance, and brightness. They were living testaments of restoration, symbols of a grace that does not erase pain, but redeems it. Years passed. My body grew older, but my spirit rested like never before. I had no illusion that life would always be gentle. Storms would come again, as they come for all who breathe. But I no longer feared them. I had met the God of the storm. I had learned that his silence is not absence, that his sovereignty is not cruelty, and that his love is not proven by comfort, but by presence. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I would sit beneath the same sky that had once darkened over my despair. The stars no longer mocked me. They reminded me of his vastness and his care. I would close my eyes and remember the voice that spoke from the whirlwind, a voice that had not explained my suffering, but had transformed it. In the years that followed, I lived to see my children's children, 4 generations in all. Each time I held a newborn, I would whisper blessings over them and think of the God who restores what no man can rebuild. Death would one day come for me, as it comes for all flesh, but I was no longer afraid. The grave had lost its sting. My Redeemer was alive, and I had seen his faithfulness with my own eyes. Looking back, I understood the pattern that pain had carved into my soul. God had not answered the question, "Why do the righteous suffer?" Instead, he had asked me, "Will you trust me even when you do not understand?" That was the true test, and that is the true faith, not in outcomes, but in his character. I began my journey believing that faith protects from suffering. I ended it knowing that faith sustains through it. The lesson written across every scar was this: our understanding is small, but his purposes are infinite. He never stopped being good. I had only stopped seeing it for a while. Now, as I tell you my story, I speak not as the man who lost everything, but as the one who discovered that nothing is ever truly lost in the hands of God. From the ashes of despair, he raised a life filled with gratitude and awe. And though the storm once silenced me, I now live in the sound of his mercy. I had asked for answers. He gave me himself. That was more than enough. From the ashes I found not answers, but God himself.